This morning's live session went super good. I had a lot of questions, and I'm going to address all of the questions again that I addressed from the morning session. Also, just a couple things that got emailed to me and questions that got asked um, during the live session itself. I will follow up and I will answer those again on this session. Also, just because there's so many super cool like graphics and memes and articles and a lot of stuff I really want to show people that I want everyone to have access to, in addition to doing this video and uploading this. I'm also going to do a voiceover like the videos that I have been doing for all of our COVID education, just so I can display some of those things and make it a little bit easier to visualize and see and understand. So I just want to start off the session by talking a little bit about COVID-19 and how the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines and the mRNA works. So we already know, we have gone over and over and over and over again, that COVID-19 is super contagious and it has the potential to affect all of the body systems. So we're talking, it can affect the cardiac system, it can affect your neurological system, it can obviously affect a huge part of your respiratory system, your GI system. Infection ranges from completely asymptomatic to intubated in an ICU or dead. So, and the tricky part about it is that we don't have any way to figure out who's going to be affected more so. It doesn't seem to fall. We know that people with chronic comorbid conditions are more likely to be affected more significantly, but we're also seeing young, generally healthy people with no other known medical issues getting really sick from this and ending up hospitalized. So we know that the disease is nasty and that it's hurting a lot of people. What I think that we struggle with a little bit is feeling like this vaccine that rolled out is so new and it got so rushed. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, just how mRNA vaccine works and the technology behind it, and then some questions that I've had about it. So Moderna and Pfizer, both, we have the Moderna vaccine. But Moderna and Pfizer are two pharmaceutical companies that received an emergency use authorization from the FDA to roll out their mRNA vaccine to prevent COVID-19. And although we've never used mRNA technology to mass produce a vaccine before, the technology itself isn't new. Really, the reason, like, pharmaceutical companies have been studying mRNA technology for over 30 years. Pharmaceutical companies have been looking at it as a potential treatment for other types of viruses, the Zika virus, the MERS virus. We really started working on a vaccine with the first SARS outbreak. Also a coronavirus, just like the one we've got now. And cancer treatments. They've been using mRNA to try and target cancer cells as well. So we've been studying this a long time. It's not new. We didn't just develop it and roll it out in a year and mass produce all these vaccines. But this is actually the first opportunity that pharmaceutical companies have had to use this technology to mass produce vaccines, because it's the first time a pharmaceutical company didn't have to develop a vaccine basically altruistically. So you see, I don't know if anybody in this group has heard that vaccines tend to be a loss leader for pharmaceutical companies, which is kind of a nasty way of saying they don't make any money, because it's a lot more financially lucrative to treat a disease with drugs than it is to cure it or prevent it. Um, but the federal government threw tons of money at these drug companies and said, please develop this vaccine, and don't let funding be any sort of an issue. Just get it done. And so, like I said, this is the first time that funding hasn't been a problem for pharmaceutical companies to get this research done and to get these vaccines mass produced. So, mRNA works by delivering a strand of RNA, like sort of just a little tiny bit of biological code, uh, into the body's own cells. So, into our own cells. And it uses the body's cells to create the spike protein, or to mimic the spike protein that's on the outside of the COVID-19 cell. So basically, it creates it mimics the thing that COVID uses to attach to our own cells and make us sick. What's cool about this is that it uses our body's own cells to mimic this protein, but you don't actually have to get sick because of it, which is super cool. So you don't have to inject yourself with a live virus with unknown, potentially unknown risks and consequences of what's the virus going to do to me. It's just a little piece of code that creates this response. So your immune system, or these huge white blood cells, the macrophages, come out of the woodwork, and they stumble across these proteins, these spike proteins, and they're like, "Oh, what's this?" And then you have a secondary line of defense called T cells and B cells that react to the pieces of the spike protein left behind after it's consumed by these macrophages. And they remember basically how to respond to this foreign body if they see it again. So they create an immune response, and then they remember in the future how to take care of it and how to get rid of it, which is basically what any vaccine does. It creates an immune response so that your body remembers how to fight off an infection in the future. But just like COVID is a pretty new disease, and just like we don't know how long, if we actually catch COVID, we're not sure how long our own body cells are going to remember how to fight the disease if we have a natural immunity or natural exposure to it. We don't know how long the vaccines are going to last yet either. They could last a year. It's likely that they'll last a little bit longer than that. But we need more information on how long our immunity is actually going to last. So, I'm going to go into my questions that I've got via email, and then I think that we will probably have plenty of time, if you guys develop more questions during this, to go through those as well. And like I said before in the first live, if you guys want resources, if you guys have questions and I answer it, but you want to see where that information came from, just send me an email and I will shoot you all the articles that I have, all the resources that I have, anything pretty much that you want to see, I will get that to you. And if you need help interpreting what it's saying or what it's telling you, I can help you with that too. So I'll just get started with my questions. The first one that I had is, will those of us that get vaccinated have to get booster shots every year? And the answer is I don't know. it's not necessarily likely that you'll have to get them every year, but we don't yet know how long our immunity is going to last with the vaccine. Just like they're seeing, it's really unlikely that you're going to get reinfected with COVID before um, 90 days. We're not sure yet with the vaccine because the vaccine's just started. So it's really vital that if you do get the vaccine, and we'd really like you to, that you participate. Hopefully you can. There's an app that you can download on your phone that you can self-report side effects, you can self-report reinfection, you can self-report all sorts of things. It's like a huge, awesome way to data mine large amounts of information to get these safety studies out there done, or effectiveness also done really super quickly, because technology is awesome when it works. And then I have the question, how long can you space out the first dose from the second dose? When is it too late to get the second dose? And there's a couple different lines of thinking on this. So with the Moderna vaccine, they are recommending you get those at least 4 weeks apart. At this point, the recommendation is that you should get the vaccine, the second dose of the vaccine, by week 12. So you shouldn't space them out more than 12 weeks. Like I said earlier, too, in the first session, there are some European countries, England is recommending that you space these out, that you actually intentionally put 12 weeks in between your first dose and your second dose. And a big part of that is just making sure that we get enough people vaccinated. But at this point, it should not decrease the immune response, and you should still be protected if you have to go 12 weeks between your first and your second doses. And it could be longer than that. We just don't know yet. Will Moral Home make the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory? And the answer is no. Will the flu vaccine continue to be mandatory? And the answer is yes. These things really don't have a ton to do with each other, with the exception of the fact that they are respiratory viruses. But yes, the flu vaccine will continue to be mandatory. The COVID-19 vaccine, at this point, we do not plan to make it mandatory. And then I had a question about whether or not the COVID-19 vaccine information, vaccine info would be available on the Wisconsin Immunization Registry. And yes, just like any vaccine that you get in Wisconsin at a clinic or a healthcare setting, that information will be uploaded into the Wisconsin Immunization Registry. Once you get the vaccine, are you still able to catch COVID? And the answer is yes, for a whole bunch of reasons that we're going to go over. So after you get, so the vaccine itself is 2 shots. So you're not fully immune until you receive both of those shots, and you've waited 14 days after receiving your second shot to be immune. But there is a huge amount of distance in between, you know, getting that very first dose and then being 2 weeks post your second dose. For example, like I got my first dose of the vaccine on January 7th. I'm not getting my second dose until February 8th, which means that I'm not going to have an immunity from the vaccine for at least 2 weeks after February 8th, which would be February 22nd. So there's a lot of days in between right now and February 22nd. And just because I have the first dose doesn't mean I'm protected. So if I get significantly exposed, or if I have a significant exposure to COVID between now and then, yes, it's possible to develop COVID. It's possible to develop COVID in that 2-week period of time between, you know, the second dose and the thought of, or that 2 weeks before you get that immunity. So the other part of that is that the vaccine is super effective for a vaccine, but it is 95% effective. and 95 is not 100. So being 95% effective is a little bit different than being 100% effective, in that 5% of people don't get the immunity that they need from getting the 2 doses of COVID vaccine. So those 5% of people could still, thank you, those 5% of people could still get infected after getting the vaccine. There's also several different strains of COVID-19. There's mutations that are coming out, and we are not sure how well yet the vaccine will protect us from those. And we also don't know if, much like the flu vaccine changes every year, if this is a vaccination that will have to change and adapt to different mutations. So again, we'll have to see, but yeah, we're not sure that it protects from all different variations or mutant strains of COVID-19. So it's possible, if you are exposed to one of those, that you could still get COVID-19. And then kind of the last point that I want to bring up about getting COVID-19 after being vaccinated is that it is possible, and they're still studying this quite a bit, a great deal, is that after getting the vaccination, even though you are not, you might be exposed to COVID-19 and you might not be ill, but you may develop a subclinical infection that would, hi, caller number 4. You might develop a subclinical infection that, even though you're not sick, even though you don't test positive, even with one of the PCR swabs, it's still possible that before your immune system kicks in, you could have an infection that is transmissible to other people. We are working, science is actively working on making a determination about whether or not this is the case. At this point, it's a theory. We're just not 100% sure about whether or not, we are not 100% sure about whether or not that is an issue. So still takes a lot of research. Like I said, it's new. We just got to get the information in and out. Has anyone caught COVID-19 more than one time? And the answer is yes. Thankfully, no one at our facility. But it is possible. If you go to the CDC reinfection information page, you can see that they're actively collecting information on that. It's rare, super rare, to catch COVID-19 more than once in that first 90 days. And it's actually getting even more rare to see it. They are considering extending that 90 days to 120 days, where they don't think that most people will be able to be reinfected before that 120 days is up. But yes, the natural immunity does wear off, and people do get COVID more than one time after initially getting the virus. Once someone has been vaccinated with both doses of the vaccine, if the vaccinated person is exposed to COVID, a COVID positive person, will the vaccinated person be required to quarantine for 14 days? And I'm super sorry, but unfortunately the answer is yes for now. We have to get more information on the transmissibility of COVID-19 in vaccinated persons. So like I said earlier, you could potentially, in theory, develop what's called a subclinical infection and still transmit COVID even though you're not sick, almost like an asymptomatic infection. But we're still working on that information. So yes, at this point, if you have a significant exposure, even after vaccination, you will have to quarantine for 14 days. And I very much hope that information changes. I hope that the vaccine is effective enough that we won't have to do that. And we'll just have to see what happens and see what the research comes out and does. And then I had questions earlier in the morning session. I don't know I am so not trying to be rude here. I'm not sure whose mic is active besides mine. So if you could just mute that, that'd be super cool. If you're calling in, I think you can mute it
I
by
just did it.
pushing. Oh, okay. Thank you. So other question is what effects does the mRNA vaccine have on fertility? And so I have to put out there that I saw it on Facebook too. There was so much stuff on the way that this mRNA vaccine and this manufactured spike protein would affect female fertility. And so tons of studies got done on this pretty much immediately. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists came out with all of their information, all of their studies. They were actually on the panel for the advisory committee on immunization practices and recommendations because we super value pregnant people, and technically they're kind of considered a vulnerable population when it comes to health information, health data. They came out and recommended that pregnant and lactating women do receive this vaccine if they are in one of the priority groups, like healthcare workers or essential frontline workers. Um, there is there's a few reasons why they came up with this information, and the first is that what we noticed about women who were childbearing age was that pregnancy created a like a 3 times higher risk for women in this age group. Pregnancy created a huge risk for ICU admission, for intubation, for pregnancy loss. So getting COVID itself is significantly more risky and significantly more dangerous than getting an mRNA vaccine, which is actually not thought to have any effect on pregnancy. Now, there are some studies that have come out that the FDA is currently reviewing called DART studies. And according to these DART studies, um, which the only ones that the FDA has actually reviewed so far is on um, pregnancy in rats, which, sorry, like I said, I hate saying rats because everyone hates rats and they seem gross, but they're super cool to study because their body's reactions and humans' reactions, oddly enough, end up being almost identical in every single medication, vaccine, pretty much anything we study. So these studies' ability to predict how humans are going to react, super close, almost 100% of the time, even closer than pigs, if you can imagine that. So, anywho, the DART study that came out on the Pfizer vaccine, the FDA did review that information in December. And basically, the vaccine was thought to be super safe. There were no. I just want to find the right. Sorry, I'm looking through my stuff here too because unfortunately, I did not pack all of this information all the way into my brain. I still have to have some references. So, DART, DART stands for Developmental and Reproductive Toxicity Studies. So, most of these have been done on the Pfizer vaccine, not the Moderna vaccine. There's not a bunch released yet. But Pfizer and Moderna are so close that the CDC has actually come out and said if it is a barrier to getting a second dose of the vaccine because you can't get either the Pfizer or the Moderna or whatever the original one was, go ahead and get the other kind for your second dose. They're that close. So, um, so we can pretty much take the information with and combine it. So this DART study studied perinatal and postnatal reproductive toxicity for the mRNA vaccines and basically showed that prior to mating, during gestation, and post gestation, there were no effects on fertility, pregnancy, or postnatal, which is actually really super good information. Now, as far as pregnancy studies in humans go, we don't have tons of information on actual pregnant people who have gotten this vaccine to work with yet. We have a few inadvertent pregnancies that happen during these studies, but really we're just looking at a few hundred. We haven't reached the point of several thousand people or cases to study yet. But what we do know is that developing COVID during pregnancy creates a high risk for pregnancy loss, for severe illness, for ICU admission, for intubation, for respiratory distress. Um, and the COVID-19 vaccination is not thought, per the FDA, per these DART studies, per the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, to cause any negative effects at this point. In either pregnant or lactating women. So no effects on pregnant women that we can see from these studies, and no effects to infants who are breastfeeding. Then Hillary thought earlier in the AM session that I should talk a little bit about the side effects of the Moderna vaccine. So how bad are the side effects from the Moderna vaccine? And I can tell you that a lot of people, just from an anecdotal standpoint, like just from a storytelling standpoint here, in our own 91 people that were vaccinated, I think we had like 3 people develop low-grade fevers, a few site reactions, and then a few headaches, some sore arms. Really nothing super significant. Most people in the Moderna and both the Pfizer studies, and I read both of those, most people did have localized reactions at the injection site itself. Redness, swelling, pain, discomfort in the arm. That was the effect of most people. A pretty large number of people actually had headaches, that they reported. And with anything, you're going to get side effects. The side effects tell you that this drug is working. So with the Moderna vaccine, actually 91.6% of people reported that they had some side effect. And that's any and all side effects. That's swelling at the injection site, arm pain, a headache, low-grade fever, anything. Cold-like or influenza-like symptoms were reported in 15% of people, and that's only after the second dose of the vaccine. After the first dose of the vaccine, I think it was like 3 or 4%. It was 3.7%. 3.7% of people reported those symptoms after the first dose of the first vaccine. So the side effects range in severity, but there is no proof, there is no direct proof yet, that any of these side effects outside of allergic reactions have led to hospitalization in people who have been vaccinated. Now, that being said, it is really important to look at the vaccine ingredients, to know your own allergies, to understand your medical history, so that you can make a good decision about whether or not this vaccine is safe to get. In general, vaccines are super safe to get. None of the vetting process was skipped just because this is an emergency use authorization. We got so much money. Well, these drug manufacturers got so much money to do these studies that they didn't have to skimp on anything. They had 30,000+ participants in each study, in each group. They had plenty of staff. They had plenty of resources to manufacture this stuff They've had plenty of resources to distribute and roll it out. There were no steps lost. So that these vaccines, they're not rushed, they're not hurried. They just weren't, um, they weren't encumbered by all of the barriers that pharmaceutical companies normally have to go through to get these things out. And the vast majority of that, and the reason that it takes so long to do this stuff usually, is funding. And that was not a barrier this time. If I had COVID-19, should I get the vaccine? And when should I get the vaccine after having COVID-19? And there's several different schools of thought on this. And it's going to change based on who you ask and whose opinion that you're looking for. So I'm going to go with Walgreens because they are officially a partner for this Operation Warp Speed, which is what the manufacture and distribution of this vaccine rollout is called, Operation Warp Speed. Walgreens Pharmacy suggests that pretty much anyone can get the vaccine as long as they're like 5 to 10 or so days out from their infectious period of COVID. I think that there was one study that I read that said the group of physicians recommended 14 days. Walgreens says that they recommend getting the vaccine even if you're just 5 to 10 days out from an infection with COVID. If you are still really sick, if you feel like your immune system's still working really hard, if you don't pass the screening questions on the consent form, well, then don't get the vaccine that day. But in general, 5 to 10 days out of your infectious period, you're fine. And then I also got asked this morning, thank you, Jen, when you would have to let me know if you were going to get this vaccine. And I would say, please let me know by February 3rd or 4th if you've changed your mind about getting the vaccine, if you had previously decided that you didn't want to get the vaccine and now you do. Please let me know as soon as possible, but definitely by February 3rd or 4th. I would super appreciate that information. And that's all of the questions that I actually had. So again, like I said before, I do want to open it up. So I want to take your questions and your calls, and you can unmute yourselves if you want to. But I do, if you guys have questions, if you want any of this information, I can send you every piece of the hundreds of pages that I have read on this. Because I want you guys to have the information that you need, that you want to make safe and informed choices about this vaccine. I also want to try to decrease all of this fear and sort of conspiracy that I'm seeing around the vaccine. There's just so much misinformation that I've read down to, I saw a meme of someone holding like a little tracking device thing or something they thought they were claiming was a tracking device, holding it in their hand, saying they pulled it out of their arm after getting a vaccine. Please don't buy into that. This needle gauge is so tiny. it can't do that. So anyway, with that being said, please email me questions. Let me know if you want resources. I will send you articles. And I do want to open it up. If you guys developed any other questions, please feel free to ask now. I've got plenty of time. We've got 25 minutes left of this, so. Does anybody have anything? I am talking to myself, which is cool.
I can unmute just so you know someone's here. I don't have any questions.
All right. Well, like I said, you guys, please let me know. Yeah, I don't have a mic, but hi. Hi. Oh
That's
yeah,
true.
you
If you
guys,
don't have a mic, you can type into the chat your questions, which
right.
is over on the right. So if you do have a question, you can type it into the chat or once again, email or ask it at a different time.
All right, so it doesn't look like I have any questions coming in. I am going to go ahead and sign out, stop the meeting. Please stay tuned. Within the next couple of days, I will have this video uploaded and I will have another video uploaded, just with some more graphics and stuff that's not just my face looking at you. So if there's nothing else, then thank you all so much for dialing in and coming to learn. I appreciate it. Bye.